We'll get started here. My name is Carlos Morera. I'm the head of the Advanced TAM organization and professional services here at Checkpoint Software Technologies. We're very excited to have you with us this morning. We have our second session or our second webinar on behalf of the ATAM organization and PS. So we're excited to go over a number of different features with you associated with some of the firewall health checks. We have the privilege of having Taylor Rojas, who's part of the Advanced TAM organization, one of our leads in the group. So he'll be going and discussing some of these points that we think are you find very interesting. Some of the highlights are just things that we want to mention before we start. We have a group of panelists like we've had before that are here to answer your questions. So we encourage you to please ask as many questions as you would like. We encourage you to ask those questions, whether it's in English, in Spanish, or in Portuguese. We have individuals in the panel that speak that language and are ready to answer those questions. The group of panelists are composed of architects, principal consultants, lead consultants, lead professional services consultants as well. So we have a very, very good group of individuals, very, very skilled in our technology, which we're sure and confident will be able to answer the questions that you may have. And throughout the presentation, ask yourself how you can utilize this feature, how you can put this into practice, how you can get really good use out of it. Maybe afterwards, you'll be able to send us for additional questions, and there'll be an email address at the end of this presentation. So we encourage you to send those questions in if for some reason your question wasn't answered throughout the course of the presentation. So without further delay, I'll turn it over now to Taylor Rojas, who will be able to give us the ins and outs of the firewall health checks in the central deployment tool.
Thank you, Carlos. As you said, my name is Taylor Rojas. I'm part of the Advanced Technical Account Management team. In a few weeks, I'll be celebrating my 10th year with Checkpoint. So today we'll be talking about the firewall health check script, how you would run it, its output, and then the top items to look at within that output. And then the central deployment tool, the new feature available in 80.40 dashboard, as well as all three options via command line, the basic, advanced, and RMA. So here's a little screenshot of the SK. It is publicly accessible as long as you have a valid support contract. So a bit about its origin. It was originally created by the support organization, and then very quickly on was grabbed and made better by the software development team. So professional services has had our own version of this for several years now as well, which is a paid solution. So why not utilize something like this that's free? We can still certainly help you review the outputs if you do have issues that you find. So a few cool features of the health check script you'll notice in the flags here. One of them is remote. The remote feature will allow you to run it from your management server to any or all your gateways. With that feature, I've seen a customer create a cron job of it that would run it against all their gateways and present the output into syslog. And then syslog can do whatever you need it to do, parse that output and create tickets based on those failures. So I showed you what the SK looks like, showed you kind of the flags. I want to show you an example of running it. So right here, I've got a VM that I've deployed. And once you add the health check script on the device, give it read or a executable permission, and it'll begin to run. It does take a few seconds for it to actually start, and I want to show you why that's taking place. So at the very beginning of the start of the script, it'll actually try to connect to Support Center to make sure you're using the latest version. So regardless of when you deployed it, it'll update as long as you do have access to the internet on those gateways or management server, wherever you're running it from. So we'll go ahead and let it run. One thing I do want to highlight here that you'll notice is that the results are all printed to the screen and color-coded, denoting the status of those checks. So when it's done, it'll actually create an output file. You'll notice it creates 3 different types, and these allow you different ways to ingest those outputs. So you get your text that you can edit. You've got your HTML that will allow you to easily review, and then your CSV if you wanted to further edit and filter. So let me go ahead and show you what that might look, or what that output looks like. So I've got here an example of the HTML. And you'll see again, it is color-coded. And the one thing I do want to highlight for everyone here is it does find errors with anything. It'll actually present an SK for you to resolve those warnings or errors. So I've got what the example output looks like. I want to go ahead and talk about, you can see there's a lot of scrolling here. What are some of the top items you should really look into? The first item I'd talk about is core files and crash dumps. Both of those are logged in there. And both of those are logged to the report out. And what they mean, first off, both of those are enabled by default in 7730 and higher versions through the core dump utility. It's just a clish command to check it. It's literally core dump. So the core files would indicate a user mode process that crashed, and a crash file indicates when and reboots. If those are within the last month, I would want to continue on with the support ticket. So open up a ticket with support, provide those outputs to them, and anything beyond a month, it was either not impactful to your environment. And then the other problem with being older is that the relative or the relevant log files might no longer be around. So they might not be able to review further. The other top item to consider and at the top of that output is the disk space. So if your firewall is logging locally, that's one thing you're going to want to look at. But if it is logging locally, consuming most of its disk space, it can actually cause your threat emulation, your DLP, your IPS packet capture features, all to stop functioning properly. So another big reason why, or another big item you'll want to look into. Another thing is if you're running this on a cluster, you'll want to check out the ClusterXL portions for the state changes and unexpected sync packet loss. Both of those could cause instability in your environment, and that's why I do suggest looking at those. The next item to consider is the known issues. I think this is very, very important. None of us have time to actually look at all those SKs out there and look for all those errors and compare that to what you see in your var log messages, your fwd.elg or cpd.elg. So any of the SKs that do actually have error prints within them, it actually does use its own database to validate if you have a known issue, that it's found in one of the log files, and tell you what that SK is relevant. So you can find the relevant hotfix or the jumbo hotfix to install to fix those problems. So I think that's very important to look at. And that's another reason why we do want the health check script to automatically update. So those are some of the top items. The other things is always going to be performance review. Is the firewall operating healthy as far as performance goes? One of the first things you want to look into is interface errors. We state anything about 0.1% to 0.5% is an acceptable loss. The most common types of interface errors you'll see are RX drops or receive side drops. Those errors generally highlight a throughput issue or a CPU contention problem. So let's talk about how this could happen. Each interface is assigned a core for its driver interrupt. It works when a packet arrives on a NIC, and an interrupt is given to handle that traffic. So that core is busy processing that traffic. When a single core is handling multiple traffic interfaces, it can cause contention or fighting for that same resource. Let's take this example we have here, ETH8 and ETH9. They both share ETH7 and ETH8. They both share CPU core 0. And let's say those are actually your external and internal interfaces, respectively. That would mean that any traffic coming in to the external or to the internal would be using the same core and thus fighting for that same resource. We would suggest in this situation moving, let's say ETH0 is your management. If you're limited on resources available, move ETH0 and maybe your external interface, ETH7, to the same core. And then that should allow less contention, less fighting, as your management interface should only be handling logging and policy push, a lot less traffic. Some ways that this can be done automatically in R80.30 or R80.30, there was an option in the Gaia portal that allowed some basic configuration more for SMDs or more for CoreXL. In 80.40, we created an automatic learning mode for you. So that should help you in those versions. The next thing under the health check and performance review of a firewall is the SecureXL and CoreXL outputs and the checks that they do. So right now, Checkpoint out of the box assumes you're enabling your blades on your firewall. So it's spec'd with our preferences towards CoreXL. SecureXL can help out with the output or the throughput of a firewall. And the checks that it's actually going to perform is accept templates, are they enabled? Drop templates, are they enabled? And then your overall acceleration status percentage as part of the forward to firewall. So let's talk a bit about what those are and then why you might see a failure. So the accept templates is basically just checking, do you have SecureXL enabled? Drop templates are going to assist the firewall in handling items such as a denial of service attack, where it needs to be able to stop traffic accelerated. So if it's deemed that a connection or a packet type could be dropped, it'll allow the acceleration of that, of further connections. And then the percentage of acceleration as part of the forward to firewall means how well is the SecureXL working? Is it working at 5% is being forwarded to firewall and not being accelerated, or is it 95% is being forwarded to firewall and not accelerated? So items that you can look at under that, there's an SK32578 that highlights what can be accelerated with SecureXL, and then as well, maybe some performance tuning in the rule base. So those are some items to look at with SecureXL. The next item is CoreXL. So the two items it's going to be looking for is CoreXL overlap and distribution. The overlap is simply going to look for, is a core being shared by both the SND and a firewall instance? Well, the SND is going to be your secure network distributor. It's going to actually be handling the traffic for acceleration. It'll also be handling what's called a global database for which core gets what traffic type. And then some of the interrupts on the NIC. The instance itself is going to be handling the blades traffic. It's literally an instance of the firewall spun up for each core you have enabled per the CP config and per licensing. So if there's overlap, I've seen it often whenever you add a new interface, it'll start sharing a core to the same core that is assigned to an instance. And something like that would require a reboot for it to fix itself. The distribution piece is actually going to be looking at, are all your cores evenly balanced? Or are some of your cores being hit heavier than the other? If that shows, then it might highlight the fact that you need to rebalance your cores, maybe more to the instances, or maybe less to the instances and more to SecureXL if it's performing better, and the driver interrupts. The other things you can consider, if it is all just CoreXL and all the traffic is being handled by the cores, but some are getting hit more, you might need to do dynamic dispatcher. If it's on the SNDs, on your interface interrupts, then it might be that you need to modify or enable multi-queue, modify the FWCTL affinities that I was showing you earlier. Like I said, multi-queue, and then as well, you could modify like the transmit hash policy if there's bombs there. So those are some of the top items that I suggest looking into under that performance health, or under the health checks and the performance review of your firewall. So I'll go ahead and move on to the central deployment tool. So, and don't forget, there are panelists there to ask questions if you have anything that I didn't cover. So the central deployment tool. First, what is it? The tool is the central deployment tool is a way to centrally update your firewall's installation base. It allows you to easily script it and create a repeatable way to upgrade, a repeatable upgrade path. So how would you get it? It's publicly available using an SK. It's just an RPM package. You'll extract it and install it. I'll show you how to do that here in a minute. And all it requires is valid CPU licensing. So as long as your gateways have valid licenses, you should be able to utilize this feature. So the central deployment tool only has a few steps to it. It's actually not too bad. And this works for any of the types that we'll cover, the basic, advanced, or RMA. First step is to create a deployment plan or edit an existing deployment plan. Then, based on that, you'll run a generate candidates list. This allows you to decide which gateways get the deployment plan, the hotfix that you're trying to install, and in what order. And then you can edit it further, as I was saying, so you can tell it which order, and then you execute that deployment plan. So the candidates list, I'll show you a good example of it in a little bit, but basically it just says, it runs the validation, the deployment plan against all your gateways in that domain or in that smart center, and determines which ones are applicable to install that hotfix or that jumbo or the main upgrade that you're doing. You'll select them, you'll tell it what order you want, or if you don't want it installed, and then you'll execute the plan. Again, this works under all of them, the basic, advanced, and RMA. The RMA has one exception, which is that you can run it with a backup all feature, and that'll make more sense in a little bit. So, before I show you how it works, I would like to talk about some examples of how I've seen customers do it, and then how I've helped other customers. So one of the biggest proponents I've seen of this central deployment tool uses it almost exclusively. They've found that once it's scripted and it's very repeatable, they actually trust this more than their own team. So they'll run this because it has such a good backup plan. I'm talking, they have like, I think it was over 1,000 gateways that they've been doing this against. And it allows them to create a gold build across the environment, making sure all gateways are running the same version, same hotfix, and they can do 40, 50 gateways in one night. And then what I've helped other customers do, in most situations, we'll generally start off with the basic, but very quickly, we all prefer the advanced. If you haven't looked at this recently, basic did bring in a few new options that I think are very cool, and why I always went advanced very quickly. Those include the preparations mode and the extended preparations option. So I'll go ahead and show you guys what the basic mode from CLI looks like. I've got a mock that I wrote up here. But before we get into that, I'd like to show you what it looks like to install CPUs. So right now I've got this downloaded here, and I'll go ahead and go into the CDT, and you'll see there's a TGZ. I just extracted that TGZ, and then you'd run the RPM package to install it. That is all documented in the SK on how to get that done. But once done, it'll create a directory called opscpcdt. It'll pre-populate this folder with a lot of these files. And to run the basic mode, you just have to edit the central deployment tool XML file. So within there, the only thing it really needs is the package to install. What hotfix are you going to try to deploy? And then from there, you can add other options such as a mal notification. You can also tell it how many gateways you want to limit the install to in one swoop. And then the repository path will actually be for your RMA backup tool that we'll talk about later. So once you have the central deployment tool XML file edited the way you'd like, you can see I mentioned place your hotfix that you're going to install wherever you're going to put it, or wherever you tell it to for the package to install. Edit that central deployment tool XML. Then you'll generate the candidates list off of that. I'll go ahead and stop that since it does take a minute. It has to validate, can that hotfix actually install on my gateways? And then once it checks that, it'll create your CSV file, your candidates file. So you'll see in this output, it only has the one gateway I have in under my management server, but you'll notice here at the end, it does actually have the upgrade order number. So you can, I want these two firewalls to install it first, so you'd put 1 and 1 under both. Then you'd put 2 and 2 under the other gateways you want to install to after the first ones are done. And if you've got a gateway you don't want to install to, then you just put a minus there. So once that's all set, then you'd actually run your execute, your install. Before you do this, you can also do the preparations or the extended preparations. So what are the differences between the two? The preparations will just push that hotfix there. The extended preparations will, and it'll actually push over the hotfix to install and verify that hotfix can be installed. That's why, or those are some of the main reasons why I did the advanced almost exclusively for my customers after a bit. So before we move on to the advanced, I do want to show you guys the new feature available on 80.40. So first, it requires 80.40 management and 80.40 gateway. But once you have both there, you'll be able to start installing jumbos or major versions at a later date, or even hotfixes that you get from support if they have an offline identifier. So first thing you'll notice, you've got two options here. You install a recommended jumbo, which is whatever checkpoint suggests that is pre-populated. Or you can even put in a specific one. We do have take 53 as a E8 or an ongoing take. You could install that on your gateways if you're testing it out right now. So you could validate it, and then you can even verify it and install it. So I do like this feature a lot because you'll notice it seems to take even less time than doing a verify from the guy at Portal, because you'd have to send out that hotfix and then do a verification of it, and that seems to take at least twice that time. So that is something I do like from that, and like I said, you can also install it. Okay, so that's the basic mode from command line as well as from dashboard. Available to you in 80.40 gateway and management. The next option is the advanced mode. Again, this is the way that I always end up going with any customer I've helped, and that's because I love the ability to do snapshots, and I love the ability to run custom scripts. So an example of a custom script I've seen, a customer of mine had OSPF on their gateways, and they didn't deem a firewall upgrade safe if it didn't bring OSPF back up afterwards. So they actually had a script to validate the amount of routes they had from OSPF beforehand and then after the upgrade. And then if there were any issues between the two, it would fail back. The other thing that is nice under the advanced mode, you have this connectivity upgrade feature that I mentioned, or that I show here. That's very relevant under any major version upgrades, as it can allow a more stateful failover between the two versions. It'll sync connections, and then any new connections go to the new firewall that was upgraded, allowing, again, more stateful of an upgrade. So what does the deployment plan look like under advanced? So I've already created one here. And this is just a basic one that I pretty much took from another one I helped a customer with. So you give it what you want to call it, and then the description of it, and then you tell it the features that you want to do. So I've got it to update CPUs, enable a connectivity upgrade. Again, not so relevant under this jumbo install, but very relevant if you're doing a major version. I tell it to go ahead and create a snapshot, and then import the package, verify the package, install it, and send me an email. Once you have this deployment plan created, the same thing is done. You'll generate your candidates list. And again, this takes a minute or two. Oh yeah, so this is something else. If you've already started down the basic path and then moved to the advanced path, you'll have to move back the essential deployment tool.xml file to the original. So if you do start down the basic, make sure you take a backup of the central deployment tool, the XML. So I'll go ahead and show you by moving them back around that this will work. But it'll take a minute or two again to validate that the gateways are able to install this package. But once they are, you'll have the advanced candidate list, which will look pretty much exactly the same. And same thing goes for editing this. You'll put the 1, 2, or whatever, however many you have that you want installed to and in what order. And you'll do a minus for anything you don't want installed to. It'll say NA for not applicable or already installed if it's a package that's already been installed. And then once you have this,
sorry to interrupt you, but it looked like Zoom was cutting off the very bottom of your screen, and we weren't able to see what you were highlighting at the bottom.
Okay. I'll just drag this up a little. Okay. I'm not sure what you guys weren't able to see, so I'll just show you some of it all over again. So I've got the, I'll just show you the files that I've created here. So I've got the R80 deployment plan. And then, as I said, I've got the update CPUs, the connectivity upgrade. And then I've got my custom features that I want to do: import, verify, and install the package, and then send me an email. See, it's a command with the output, the command with the output. So it's just in pairs. And then, like I said, as you've ran that, then you will have your candidates list, which will allow you to edit the order of it. I think those are probably the only things that you guys weren't able to see. Okay. And yes, after you've created that candidates list, then you'll just execute it or perform the install. So I execute that deployment plan with my candidates list, and it will in that process. With that, you can also create custom scripts. There's in it from our documentation here on the central deployment tool that shows you how to create your own user scripts. So you've got ways to tell it to reboot between or in the middle of the CDT job. And so it allows you to do other installs. You can validate, is the ftbcurrent.conf custom settings I have still there, for an example. Okay, so that's some of the basics under the advanced mode. The final thing I want to talk about is the RMA tool. So the RMA tool right now is just a command line option only, just like the advanced. But what it does is it allows you to, when ran, the RMA backup tool will saves all of your backup information on your management server, actually. So it allows a backup of your gateways off device. So it's a good way to back up your device. Each security gateway backup file is saved on a file name corresponding to that gateway's object name in the management database. The size of those RMAs are about 200K, those backup files. So they are zipped up and it's only grabbing just what is needed. But think of the RMA tool like a snapshot. It's relevant for that moment in time. And thus, each time you change the settings of a security gateway, whether in Smart Console or under the Gaia operating system, you should collect a new backup of that gateway. So what all does it back up? It'll actually back up everything from just the first-time wizard settings all the way up to your SIC key, your fwcurrent.conf files, all your custom settings. And then for the restore, it allows you to restore as much as you need. So it's very much like Blink. Once you got a management interface on your gateway, it's IP'd and it has a default route, and then you're ready to go with that CDT restore, the RMA's restore. So let me go ahead and show you what that one looks like as well. So you've got a few flags here for the RMA. For the first time, you'll probably want to go ahead and run the RMA backup all feature. It'll actually back up everything to wherever you put your repository path. So you've got the repository path in home admin. Let me show you. I've already backed up this my one gateway under here. It creates a backups folder. And so I have my backup of my gateway. Within that tar file, you'll see a few of the settings. I've got my first time wizard settings. I've got my 6 settings. I've got any additional settings, like I was mentioning, the fwcurrent.conf. And then I've got like blade configuration information of what hotfixes to deploy. It does create a complete backup. So that's what I wanted to cover today. So in summary, we talked about the firewall health check script, how to run it, how to ingest that output, and how to do some performance tuning to your firewalls. And then for the central deployment tool, I showed you guys how to install it, how to create your own deployment plan, or edit the existing for the basic mode. And then as well, just how to run that script and how to edit the candidates list. So hope you guys learned something today. And with that, I'll go ahead and hand it back over to Carlos.
Well, thank you, Taylor. I appreciate your time this morning. Thank you for going over those features. I'm sure that myself, like everyone else on the session this morning, definitely found it interesting and something that we can really get into use into our own environments. Just as a reminder for everyone that attended this morning, again, we're trying to keep this short and sweet, make sure that we're conscious of your time. We know that it's valuable. So we appreciate you taking the time this morning and spend with us these few minutes so we can go over these 2 important features that we think, again, you'll find of good use. If you have additional questions and we weren't unable to answer those questions on the panel, please send those questions to atam@checkpoint.com so we can go ahead and get those questions answered for you. If you're one of our current ATAM customers and you have ATAM as part of your support contract, like I said before, please reach out to your ATAM engineer. He or she will be able to answer any questions you have and also work with you to enable these features in your own environment so you can definitely get good use of it. So we're looking forward to our next webinar. We'll be working on scheduling that hopefully for the next month. And if you have any recommendations or suggestions as far as what topics you would like for us to cover, again, let us know. We want to make sure that we make good use of your time and we can cover these points that are of value to you. So until further notice, thank you so much, and we'll see you soon. Take care.